All right, so for this week's project, we're going to be taking a look at yet another viewer-submitted unit. This is an Alpine in-dash car stereo equalizer, model 3339. And this comes from Armando. He lives in Texas. He got in touch with me about this one. He's complaining that the unit is not powering up or it's not working. So of course that would cover a little bit of territory. We'll just have to get it opened up and see if we can figure out what's going on. First get it hooked up and make sure we can duplicate what he's talking about. Absolutely beautiful unit, single DIN dash opening for this. And I can't imagine how awesome this would look mounted into a car with a DIN-sized radio right above it. And I believe that's his intention for this. I believe he said he has an IROC Z that he's going to put this in. So that in itself holds a lot of awesomeness. And with this EQ and a nice radio, he'll be set. So we'll come in as always. We'll have a look at the buttons and see if we can figure out what's going on with it. If you look at this, there's a couple of pieces here. The first piece is basically the part that gets mounted into the dash, which controls the equalizer. And then of course the bottom unit is the electronics portion of it that has all of the input and output connections on this. You get one set of RCAs in and 2 amps for RCA outputs. So you need a minimum of 1 amp to use the EQ. So we'll get it checked out and see if we can figure out what's going on. Our intro music this week, we're checking out the 1983 self-titled EP by the band Rat. And of all these Los Angeles-based bands, I've kept my eye on a few of them, 5 or 6 of them, and Rat is definitely one of them. So let's check out a little bit of my favorite tune from the EP here called You Think You're Tough, and then we'll get started on his Alpine. All right, let's go ahead and come back in and we'll take a look at the unit here. The first thing, we have a plastic carrying case. Once you eject the control panel or face piece from this, you can just store it away in this plastic box for safekeeping. And then the piece that gets mounted into the dash, basically this is just a hollow box. The only thing here really is just the connector for this face piece. And of course you have a cable coming out the back, but otherwise it's completely hollow on the inside. Taking a look at the face of the unit, it's got some scratches, it's a little dirty. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen in the world, but maybe we can clean it up and get it looking a little bit better for him. And it's an 11-band equalizer, and starting on the low side of things, looks like 31.5 hertz going all the way to 18 kilohertz for the high frequency side. And we do have a band or a button for each band. I assume you push this button to adjust the particular band that you want to make changes to. We have some push buttons here labeled down and beep and up and screen. The only thing is that these have kind of bottomed out. They no longer have the momentary tactile switch feel to them as all of these do. So this is probably somewhere we'll be taking a look at to see what happened there. Since these are probably the ones that are used the most, they're probably pushed on a lot. And over the years, the switches have probably broken. Got a few other controls here. Fader subwoofer, something labeled SFE-DRC. Not exactly sure what that is. P/M and scan. Again, we need to look that up in the book to figure out what's going on there. And then we have buttons for 4 presets. The lettering on these buttons is pretty much worn out at this point, but you can tell that that's pretty much what they're for. And then we have the eject button, which you push this and the front of it kind of just hinges out. And I'll try to do this with one hand here. It came off pretty easy. And then of course this just stores away in that case right there. Got an edge of a circuit board card there and then a slot that it goes into here. And all that still looks pretty clean. There doesn't seem to be any issues. And of course, like I said, this box is hollow. And then we have a DIN connection for the plug-in to the main piece. Although they're kind of reversed from what you would think they would be. You would think this would be the male end, but the male end is mounted on the main unit, which we'll take a look at here. Very thin piece. Stash it under your dash, under the seat, maybe in the glove compartment. And on the back of it, there's the male end of that plug, which is weird to see that way. And then we got a few connections here. You got the front and rear for your output. And then you have also a subwoofer output. I didn't catch that when I initially looked at it. And then you have the input for the radio to go into the unit. And then a few controls here. It says control unit plug for the face piece. And then a few wires labeled battery dimmer, remote, and ground. So apparently it is possible to dim the display through the dimmer in your car, which is a pretty cool feature for this. It's a very thin unit, and I'm sure we'll be opening it up to see what's going on inside there if we don't have any power. And we have two switches here, stereo mono, and then a phase switch for the subwoofer. Very cool. So I think the first thing we probably want to do, let's go ahead and hook it all together, get the power supply involved, and see if we truly don't have any power. And then we can go from there. So give me a moment for that, and we'll pick back up. All right, let's pick back up real quick here. I want to show you something that I caught right off the get-go. Usually the first thing I'll do is I'll check the fuse and to make sure it's not blown. And in this case, it's definitely not blown, and it's never going to be. This is a 30 amp fuse they put in here. Basically, the original fuse probably blew, maybe due to the installation. Something happened during installation, and they didn't have the correct one, so they put this in here. Now, this 30 amp fuse, you might as well go ahead and just take the fuse out and connect the two ends of the wire right together, because the fuse in the car would blow before this 30 amp fuse would blow. So we're going to take that out. We'll start off with a 1 amp fuse. I'm not sure what goes in here. I couldn't imagine it being more than 2 amps, and then we'll go a little further. But anytime you have the wrong fuse, or anytime you have a fuse blow, always go and get the correct one that goes in there. Because if there is something internally shorted in here and you put a 30 amp fuse in the fuse holder, basically what you've done is turned the weakest piece in this equalizer in the shorted part of the circuit into the fuse, and it's going to start smoking and burning up. So let's go ahead and we'll get the right one in there, and we'll continue with getting it hooked up. All right, so I'm picking back up with you. Went ahead and got some power hooked up to the unit. Replaced the 30 amp fuse with a 1.5 amp fuse, kind of splitting the difference between a 1 and a 2 there. And of course, once I applied power to it, I didn't have any display on the front of the unit, but I did have basically a little bit of current draw here, nothing excessive. And I went ahead and made the connections, tape in and tape out, or excuse me, in and out of the equalizer through the tape monitor, tape in and tape out. And notice that it is working. When you make adjustments on the front, you can hear the sound changing. Of course, we just can't see what's going on right here. But if you hold this, and I can see it, I don't know if this camera will pick it up, but you can see the activity going on the screen. There just doesn't appear to be any kind of a backlight going on there. I don't know if I'll be able to show it to you with this camera, but it is definitely there. You can see it. Yeah, I just don't think this will be able to pick it up. But if I push these buttons, we'll turn the music up a little bit, you'll hear it changing.
From Cinderella on Classic 90s. It's a band that happened to come to town to play the 97X.
So it is definitely doing its thing. We just can't see anything what's happening here. So I think the first thing I probably want to do, I just want to open this up and have a look inside to make sure there's nothing crazy going on here, and then we'll focus our attention on the front face piece. So let's open this up real quick and just take a quick look and see if there's anything here we need to be concerned about. So give me a second for that. All right, as I come back in with you, I went ahead and got this main board out of the bottom portion of this where all the jacks and stuff is at. These are mounted into this frame piece, but they do unplug to where we can kind of get a look. And there is a few things here to be concerned about, and I'm not sure, depending on what type of backlight that front piece has, this might be a definite area of interest. In particular, right here, I don't know, again, how well this camera would be able to pick it up, but there's a cap here. There's a lot of components that's really dark in this area right here that I noticed. I'll see if I can zoom in and get it for you. Those Zener diodes right down through there, really dark. A few other things. And there's clearly a cap. This cap right here has clearly got some leakage. So they got it glued to the board there right alongside this one. And so I don't know, depending on how they have the backlight, but I don't know if they'd be a separate line coming through this DIN connector for the backlight or not. So I'm almost tempted to want to know. Well, I think the first thing I want to do is I'm going to ESR some of these caps, and we're going to double check the darkened components in through here and make sure that there isn't anything going on with any of these, because there's a little bit of wear and tear here. So I'll start that process, and I'll bring you back if I have any findings other than what I expect. At the very least, this cap is probably okay. This one right next to it is definitely leaking, but we're going to run all of these right in through this power supply section right here and make sure they're okay. Luckily, they did not use any of those surface mount silver caps in this. All of these appear to be the ones from appear to be standard electrolytics. I'm sorry. I just got a message that the battery was dying. So let me go ahead and I'll end the clip right here, and then I'll pick back up with you once I have some information about this stuff right here. So give me a moment for that. All right, so I'm picking back up with you. It's going to be a couple days later. Got nice down deep in the paint on this one already, and when we left off last time, I was in the process of removing a few caps here in the power supply section of the main unit, and I did find quite a bit of wet leakage that I've already cleaned up on the top side and bottom side of the board. I'll show you some of these caps here. This main one, 22 mic at 16, or 2200 at 16, which I suspected was probably okay. As it turns out, it's pretty nasty, and it's dried up now, but when I first took it out, it was nasty and wet. And the one right alongside it that was laying vertical or laying flat is just as bad and completely open. I pulled a few more out, and they also look pretty terrible. So we're going to be changing what I suspect is going to be every cap right in this section of the power supply here. There's a few right alongside there. I did run all those Zener diodes. They're all fine. They all check okay, so I think we're going to be good there. So it looks like we're going to be doing a little recapping here in the power supply. The display section, I went ahead and took that apart. And of course, initially wanted to look into these switches, but also wanted to see what type of backlight they use for this. And as it turns out, it's just standard incandescent bulbs. There's appear to be two 6-volt bulbs here. I don't know if I have 6 volts, but I do have some 12s, so we'll probably just drop some 12s in there to get it lit up so we can see what it looks like. Now, the way that the LCD works on this one is pretty much the same way it works in my Fluke multimeter. I've had to take that apart before, and this piece right here, one of the things I noticed, it looks like we got some stuck characters here. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be that way or if it's something that is damaged, but the way that this works is there's a conductive pad on the back, and that conductive pad, there's one on the top and the bottom, basically presses into all these contact points on the board, which of course makes connection to the microprocessor here. So I'm not sure what we'll find as far as these characters that appear to be stuck in the display. We'll have to get it back up and going and then take a look at it, but there's no way to avoid taking it off. You got to take it off in order to get these lamps changed, and both lamps are open. There's also open lamps right here in the 4 preset buttons that's going to need to be changed. So I think I at least have two 12s that we can put in the display and get that back up and going, but first and foremost, we're going to go ahead and start the process here. This is a pretty low profile 2200 at 16 volt. I don't have one like that, but I do have one that I think we can just place vertically like they did the capacitor to the left of it, and we should be fine. So once I have all that taken care of, I'll pick back up with you. All right, so let's come back in, just give you kind of an update on where I'm at with all of this. Went ahead and changed them all out from the power supply. There's about 10 there, and got the board cleaned up. Did the same thing with this 2200 at 16 that was done with this 330 right here. Just kind of laid it horizontally, and then put some heat shrink on the leads there to protect those from anything, and then just went down the line and changed every one of them. And every single one of them was bad, was leaking, and some of them, when I was trying to remove them, the leads pulled directly out of the capacitor. That's how bad they were. But I went ahead and got all those traces cleaned up, top and bottom. Bottom looks real good, or about as good as it's going to. I pretty much went ahead and just resoldered everything in this section after I cleaned it up. And these boards from back in the day seem to have quite a bit of excess flux on them anyway, so it's hard to tell what was leakage and what was flux. So I got it all cleaned up and it all looks pretty good. So we should be okay there. Went through some of these other ones. You can see there's probably 100 more capacitors on this board. I don't know exactly how many's on here, but I just picked little cells of them to check. And of course, these are all in the signal processing. So all of these were within tolerance, or what I would consider to be okay. If you really wanted to be particular, you could go through and change all of those, but you'd be spending a whole hell of a lot of time doing it. And I'm not sure that changing them all would really affect the sound that much, because they're not really that bad. Some of them are a little bit on the, I'd say, borderline, but not anything that I would throw a red flag up at. All the larger ones are perfectly fine. I took a couple of these out just to check and make sure there was no leakage, and there wasn't. I think all that leakage was really just kind of in this section right here of the power supply. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put this back together into the frame. I went ahead and resoldered up the connections here to make sure there wouldn't be any issue with that. And then we're going to move on to this. And we'll do the camera overhead, and I'll take you along for this part of the journey. We're going to switch out these two switches, and I have located a couple of these from a circuit board I saved. So we'll change those out, and we'll get these bulbs changed out. And we're just going to do the 12 volt bulbs temporarily, just to get this thing lit up so we can see what's going on. And then from that point, we'll order up the correct ones to change in the preset buttons, and the two correct ones for the display. So give me a moment. I'll set the camera up overhead, and we'll start working on this. All right, let's go ahead and pick back up. I've already kind of started working on the front panel board that has the display on it. Our biggest issue, obviously, was the two display lights that were out. And I did locate a couple of 6.3 volt lamps in the size that we need. I went ahead and changed out this one here just so I could make sure it was a good match as far as the way that it looks, or in the height of it, and it is pretty much a dead-on replacement there. It might be just a tiny bit smaller, but it fits into that opening in the back of the LCD just fine. So we'll change out the other one on the other side, and at least we'll be done with this part and we can button it up. But we had another problem here with the two switches. And the thing with these is that the green ones, which are the factory ones, pretty much lost all of their spring action and bottomed out. So you could still actually activate it. You just had to push it so hard, you almost pushed the circuit board right through the frame of the piece. So I went ahead and swapped one out, and we're going to swap the other one out on video. And I took those from this old circuit board that I saved from years ago, knowing that one day, someday, it would come in handy. And sure enough, today is the day, and it has come to the rescue. There's only a slight difference between the two switches. These, the ones that come from the factory on the Alpine EQ, had extended legs that go all the way through the board, but that's not a big deal because we have top and bottom traces here, which are connected together, so we can just put it right on the surface and solder it in, and it shouldn't be a problem. So let's go ahead and we'll take it out, and you can see here on the one that I've already done, where basically we just got some, you know, balled over solder pads there since there's nothing going straight through. But on the other side, you can see, I'll see if I can zoom you in a little bit. You can see here that we have the switch just soldered to the top part of it, kind of surface mount style. So let's see if we can get this one out. And we're going to be using my new soldering iron, which has been working out very well, the ECG one. Didn't come with a tip I would have preferred. I would have preferred one that was a little finer point on it, but I took it and kind of grinded it down a little bit, so it's better, but I'm going to actually order, they make one that is a fine point, and I'm going to order that one. And we might be able to push this switch just right through, maybe. Okay, and then from here, we can just heat it up and grab it off the top side of the board. And that'll be the end of that. And then what I did with the other one is I just added a little solder to the pads here. Then kind of got the switch in the spot that I wanted it. I know it's my hands blocking it here. Let's see. So basically I just lined it up, tagged one end of it, and then we'll come along to the other side here, and we will add a little more solder. And then when we flip to the other side, we'll go ahead and close those off. And we'll clean up the board a little bit. That looks pretty good. It's not into, you know, it's about on par as far as height and stuff as the other switches is. It might just be a tad bit bigger maybe, but it should work fine for what we need it to do. So I think we're okay there. Now this other lamp, I'm going to go ahead and swap that out, and then from that point we'll put the LCD panel of it back in there and we'll fire it up and see what we got. The only thing that really concerns me again is just these characters that seem to be, you know, kind of permanently on here. I'm not sure if that's right, if that's normal or what. Camera's not really catching it real good, but there's some characters that are just kind of always present, and I'm not sure if that's the way it's supposed to be. So we could have some damage on that, but if so, there's not really anything we can do. It is what it is, and we'll have to go ahead and use it as it is. So let me go ahead and get the other lamp put in, and we'll get it back together and we'll see what we got. So give me a moment for that. All right, let's pick back up on our Alpine car EQ model 3339. And when we left off last time, we were in the process of getting the lamps installed in the front panel display here, as well as the two buttons for the up and down, or the two switches. got all that taken care of, and we did get our display restored. But as we anticipated, we do have some stuck characters here, maybe 6 or 7 right along the top. And it doesn't seem to affect the operation. It does still work. The spectrum analyzer works. But unfortunately, those characters are static in place. They're not moving. And this isn't anything related to the character generator IC or any type of loose connection. When I had that display completely away from the circuit board, those characters were still active there. So I'm not sure. There may be a fix for that, but I'm definitely not comfortable with trying to do anything to that LCD screen that would render it completely useless, because that would be definitely sad for sure. Now, once I had everything back together, main board and the processing unit, I did discover that there's a second issue, and that is with intermittent sound processing. I can get a signal in, get it back out, and sometimes when you're making adjustments on the front panel display, those changes aren't registered, or it's stuck in one mode and it won't change. I mean, you can change the buttons over here and it will switch. It can show you that it's switching, but the actual sound itself doesn't switch. So I'm not sure what is going on with that. But I did have an opportunity to speak with Armando today, and surprisingly enough, he has a second one of these processing units. I'm not sure how lucky that is. So he's going to go ahead and send that out to me, and I'm going to go ahead and go a little further with the troubleshooting on this. And I have been through this circuit board several times now. Of course, you're only seeing a 30 plus minute video of the whole process, but I've been through this several times, going through all those through-hole traces from the top side to the bottom side where any of that leakage could have damaged something, and I have been able to come up with absolutely nothing. Went through every single capacitor over on the processing side, only found 1 or 2 that was in the realm of could possibly be a problem. I changed those out and still have the intermittent issue. So I'm not exactly sure what's causing it, but we're going to get the second piece here and see if we can go a little further with it. But we're going to go ahead and check this out. It is actually in a working state right now. So for the demonstration, we do get to see it actually working. So Armando was requesting a little ZZ Top. So we're going to check out that while we look at the display on this bad boy. And even with these characters being a little flawed, this thing still is very awesome looking. Let's check this out.
When you wake up in the morning and the light has hurt your head, the first thing you do when you get up out of bed is hit that streets a running and try to beat the masses. Go get yourself some cheap sunglasses. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Spider thing, and I followed her all night in a funky fine Levi's, and her sweater's kinda tight. She had a West Coast strut that was sweet as molasses. Man, what really knocked me out was the cheap sunglasses. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
We'll go ahead and pause the music real quick here. I just want to point out that this thing does have several different modes, about 11 different modes altogether, where you can change the spectrum display, where it'll fire all kinds of crazy different modes out. And I had it in number 3 there, which is one of my favorite ones. And as we pick back up with the music on the way out of this video, we'll look at number 4, which is also very cool. But I want to thank you guys very much. I appreciate you checking out the video this week. Also appreciate you checking out all the videos on the channel, as well as all the new people that have subscribed. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if we'll wind up with a part 2 on this, but most definitely we will do a follow-up video to let you know what my final outcome with this is. I'm hoping that the second piece will be the ticket to finding out what the intermittent problem is with this one, or at least the second piece, probably going to have some of the same power supply issues as the first piece, but maybe we'll get lucky and it won't it won't have an issue, and we can just recap it and we'll be good to go. So anyway, thank you guys very much, and let's go ahead and finish up with cheap sunglasses on the way out here.
Now go out and get yourself some thick black frames with the glass so dark they won't even know your name. And the choice is up to you, 'cause they come in two classes. Rhinestone shades of cheap sunglasses.